And now I give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. The mission of the Security Council of the United Nations to Myanmar and Bangladesh was extremely timely and useful. The members of the Security Council had a chance to get a first-hand look at the situation in Rakhine State and its surroundings, and also examine the efforts undertaken to stabilize that situation. We'd like to thank the authorities of Bangladesh and Myanmar for their efforts. We're also grateful to both presidencies, Poland and Peru, and of course to Kuwait. Without the logistic support of Kuwait, we would not have been able to fully fulfill our program. It's also very important that following this mission, the Council was able to agree on a consensus document, a press statement, which outlines a position of the Security Council regarding the crisis and the priority measures that must be taken by those involved in the crisis to overcome it. We note that the situation in the region continues to be complex, but overall under control. At the same time, we would like to note that both Naypyidaw and Dhaka have demonstrated a constructive readiness to deal with this very complex situation, and also their openness to dialogue and cooperation with the international community. All of us, without exception, expressed our unquestioned solidarity to the governments and people of Bangladesh who have been dealing with an unprecedented humanitarian crisis and challenges. At the same time, they opened their doors in a show of solidarity, and they opened their hearts to hundreds of thousands of people who were in a dire situation. It's also important to note that the authorities of Myanmar did not try to conceal anything or try to avoid a rather unpleasant discussion. Quite to the contrary, they demonstrated complete transparency. The Council was able to visit, and I hope that all my colleagues in the Security Council will support me here, were able to visit the most problematic areas and have a frank discussion with all parties. Also, what gives rise to optimism is the oft-stated commitment by the officials in Myanmar to the full implementation of the recommendations of the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State headed by Kofi Annan and the provisions of the bilateral agreement with Bangladesh on the return of refugees. Now, as a separate issue, it's important to underscore the readiness of Naypyidaw to cooperate with the humanitarian agencies of the UN and its partners. And this is testimony to this is the signature of the Memorandum of Understanding with UNDP. Another positive fact is the expansion of access to Rakhine State to foreign observers. We'd also like to commend the systematic efforts of the Myanmar authorities to deal with socioeconomic problems of the state. As I said already, we greatly value the efforts of the government of Bangladesh, which has taken on a very heavy burden and has hosted hundreds of thousands of refugees in Myanmar, demonstrating an extremely timely solidarity. In this connection, the international community must provide appropriate support to the authorities of Dhaka in tackling with the acute humanitarian consequences of the crisis. At the same time, we should not forget that Myanmar will also require support as refugees return. The Russian Federation, in the course of 2018-2019, will allocate to both countries resources through the World Food Program. We believe that the humanitarian assistance to forced refugees cannot be subject to political conditions and should be provided in strict cooperation with the United Nations principles as defined by Resolutions 46/182 of the General Assembly. Madam President, we believe that the crisis that has occurred must be resolved first and foremost bilaterally through negotiations between Myanmar and Bangladesh. Bearing in mind its scale, it's hard to imagine a rapid solution to this crisis. The existing underlying problems in Rakhine State are complex and multifaceted. They can only be resolved through exclusively peaceful, political, diplomatic means by establishing dialogue between the authorities of Nipitau and Daki, involving the representatives of all communities and confessions. The efforts of the international community must be focused on assisting the governments of Myanmar and Bangladesh in finding practical solutions. Also, it's very important for accusations of human rights abuses and sexual violence to be considered by Myanmar and Bangladesh through exclusively judiciary mechanisms, and not on the basis of statements by the media or in the social media, but on the basis of evidence which both countries must collect. In the course of the mission of the Security Council, the Myanmar authorities stated more than once that they certainly do not intend to shirk their responsibilities or try to protect those who are guilty. To extradite the corresponding investigations, Nipitau suggested that refugees submit their requests or complaints to the courts in Myanmar. For these goals, they are ready to coordinate their efforts closely with Dhaka. We believe that these efforts are in the right direction. This would be a concrete, practical step in combating impunity, which requires the support of the international community. It's important also to avoid politicizing the crisis with the refugees. It's unacceptable. The attempts to use it by external players are unacceptable to resolve political goals that have no connection with this crisis. What's important is to help Nipitau and Dhaka to find solutions by taking into account their concerns, including in the area of combating extremism and terrorism. That was precisely the main goal of our mission. It's important to create conditions for safe and dignified repatriation of refugees to their homes, which we believe is only possible through a constructive involvement of the authorities of both states in this process. We believe that support to the governments of Myanmar and Bangladesh in dealing with the crisis in the Rakhine State should be conducted in a spirit of equal rights and mutual respect. We hope that all sides will act in a responsible way and prudently in order to avoid a repetition of escalating the crisis. Madam President, we are all aware that the situation in the region is extremely precarious. The monsoon is right around the corner, which could complicate the situation even further. However, we are convinced that the premise for a successful solution to the crisis has been created. We have the recently appointed Special Envoy, Christina Schraner-Burger, appointed by Secretary General Guterres, and we need to give her time to work. We also have the understanding expressed by Nipitau and Dhaka of the need for joint efforts. And lastly, we have the unity of the Council as enshrined in the statement of the Security Council for the press. Bearing all this in mind, I believe that in the course of the visit, we were able to establish a good foundation to start actively tackling for the authorities of Bangladesh and Myanmar to start tackling the problems they face with the constructive and interested cooperation of the international community as a whole and of the Security Council in particular. I would like to underscore that to achieve this, we need to preserve and strengthen the unity of the Security Council, which has made this unity made it possible to agree on a press statement rather quickly. And I hope that all the members of the Security Council understand this and will not fall prey to the temptation of using this situation to pursue their narrow domestic political aims. Resolving the crisis, this will not contribute to resolving the refugee crisis, for sure. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for his statement.